He was a billionaire feared by every man, hiding dark secrets behind his wealth. But when a pure church girl captured his heart, what she later discovered nearly destroyed their marriage, until something shocking happened. Stay tuned because you're about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. Adrian Cole was the kind of man people spoke about in hushed tones. At only 35, he had built a fortune that seemed untouchable. His name was printed on magazines, his photographs flooded business newspapers, and his face appeared on billboards as the face of success. He owned skyscrapers, luxury cars that lined up like soldiers in his garage, and private jets that could take him anywhere at a moment's notice. To the world, he was a young billionaire who had it all. But behind the glamour was a secret world, one darker than most people could imagine. Adrian's empire was not built on honesty alone. Some of his businesses were legal, yes, but many of the streams that fed his wealth flowed from illegal activities: secret deals, smuggling, money laundering, and partnerships with dangerous men who were feared even by their own families. His smile at public events was a mask, carefully worn to cover the truth. Adrian lived in a world where trust was as fragile as glass. His associates were not friends, only partners waiting for the right time to betray. The same men who shook his hands in the daylight would not think twice about pointing a gun at his chest in the dark. He had seen blood, fear, and betrayal far too many times. But he had also seen money grow, money that made doors open, money that made governments turn a blind eye, money that made him powerful. Yet in the middle of all that, Adrian felt an emptiness. His nights were restless. The parties, the women, the luxury, none of them filled the silent ache in his chest. He told himself he was fine, that this was the price of being a king in a crooked world. But deep down, he knew something was missing. One bright Sunday morning, while driving his black Rolls-Royce through the city, he heard singing. It was soft at first, like a whisper carried by the wind. The sound made him slow down. To his left stood a small church, old, simple, with white paint peeling off the walls. The doors were wide open, and inside, a group of people sang with such joy that it stopped him in his tracks. Adrian parked his car across the street. For reasons he couldn't explain, he stepped out and walked toward the church. No guards, no entourage, just him. As he entered, the smell of old wood and flowers filled the air. The choir sang with closed eyes and lifted hands. Their voices rose, not polished like those at concerts, but raw, full of faith. And then he saw her. Grace Morgan stood in the front row, her face glowing as she sang. She wasn't dressed in diamonds or silk, just a simple floral dress. Yet she looked more radiant than any woman Adrian had ever seen. Her eyes were closed, her hands lifted, and her voice carried a sweetness that pierced through the noise in his mind. For a moment, Adrian forgot everything: the illegal businesses, the dangerous deals, the fear that ruled his world. All he saw was Grace, and all he heard was the sincerity in her voice. He sat down quietly, almost hiding at the back. But his heart wasn't quiet. Something about that moment stirred him. For the first time in years, he felt a strange peace, a tug he couldn't explain. When the service ended, Adrian remained seated, watching as Grace greeted people with warm hugs and laughter. She had no idea that a billionaire had just walked into her world. She had no idea that the man watching her carried secrets heavy enough to crush a marriage. But Adrian knew one thing as he stood to leave: this woman was different. And he wanted her in his life, no matter what it cost. As Adrian stepped out of the church into the sunlight, one thought filled his mind: this woman was different, and he wanted her in his life, no matter what it cost. He did not speak to her that first day. He stood across the street beside his car and watched people spill out with bright faces. Grace laughed with two elderly women, then helped a little boy tie his loose shoelace. Adrian felt a pull he could not name. He reached for his phone, then stopped. Not today, he told himself. Don't rush this. He came back the next Sunday. He dressed simply, no designer suit, no loud watch. He sat near the back again, silent as the music rose. When the service ended, he walked toward a folding table where a young woman handed out sign-up sheets for the church's community kitchen. Grace was beside her, writing dates on a poster with a blue marker. "Hi," he said, careful and calm. "I'm new here." Grace turned, her smile gentle. "Welcome. I'm Grace."
"Adrian," he replied.
He waited for a sign that she recognized his last name, but nothing flickered in her eyes. "I'd like to help with the kitchen." "Great," she said, sliding a form toward him. "We cook on Wednesdays and Saturdays. It's simple work: wash, chop, serve, clean." "I can do simple," he said, and meant it. On Wednesday, Adrian showed up in a plain black t-shirt and jeans. He left his car down the block and told his driver and guards to stay out of sight. Inside the small kitchen, steam misted the windows and the air smelled of onions and pepper. Grace tied an apron around her waist and gave him a hairnet. "Have you ever chopped onions?" she asked, teasing. He smiled. "I've chopped deals. I can learn onions." She laughed, and the sound settled his chest. For 2 hours, they worked side by side. He carried heavy pots like they were paper. She moved with quiet grace, checking on the elderly first, setting aside extra bowls for latecomers. When a teenager came in with his little sister and tried to act tough, Grace handed him an extra roll and said, "You are safe here." The boy's face softened. During a break, they sat on crates by the back door. The alley was warm with the smell of bread and summer rain. "What do you do, Adrian?" she asked. "I run companies," he said. "Property. Logistics." It was true, but not the whole truth. He kept his eyes on the sky. "Work can be noisy. I wanted to do something quiet today." "I'm glad you came," Grace said. "We need strong hands." She glanced at the food line through the door. "And soft hearts." He swallowed. No one in his world spoke like that. He returned the next Saturday, then the next. The rhythm felt clean. Chop, stir, serve, wash. People began to greet him by name. He learned where the church kept extra salt, how Mrs. Paula liked her tea, and that Grace hummed when she focused. He started staying for Sunday service, too, sitting where he could see her face when she sang. One afternoon, after they cleaned the last tray, he asked, "Would you like to get coffee? Somewhere bright and busy." Grace nodded. "Only if we meet in the open. I don't do late nights or private rooms with men. I'm just getting to know." "I can honor that," he said. They met at a small cafe, with chalkboard menus and twinkle lights. He arrived early, left his guards outside, and picked a table near the window. Grace came in wearing a simple white blouse and a navy skirt. She carried a paperback novel and a small purse. They talked about little things at first: books, music, how the rain made the city smell like wet stone. Then deeper things: childhood, fear, the kind of future each hoped for. "Honesty matters to me," Grace said. "Not perfection. Just truth." Adrian held her gaze. "I'm learning to tell the truth." "What does that mean?" she asked softly. "It means I have spent years protecting my life with silence," he said. "I am trying to change that, step by step." She nodded, not pressing him. Steps count. Days turned into weeks. Adrian arranged a schedule so he could join Grace for brief walks in the park, simple dinners on paper plates, and Wednesday prayers in the church's small side room. He donated to the kitchen quietly, asking the treasurer to keep his name off the wall. When the pastor tried to thank him from the pulpit, he shook his head and pointed at the volunteers instead. But the other world did not vanish. It never did. One night, as he and Grace left a book fair, his second phone buzzed with a coded tone. He excused himself, stepped behind a column, and answered. "Shipment delayed," a voice hissed. "Police at the docks. Do weary route." "Hold," Adrian said, eyes on Grace through the glass. She was flipping through a children's book, smiling at an illustration of a bright yellow kite. "No moves tonight. Let it die, if it must." "That's money gone," the voice growled. "Let it go," Adrian repeated, then ended the call and powered the phone down. He stood very still for a moment, listening to the tide of noise in his skull. When he rejoined Grace, He forced his shoulders to relax. "Everything okay?" she asked. "It will be," he said. It was the closest to truth he could offer. Soon he met her family. They lived in a modest house with a garden filled with mint and tomatoes. Her father asked about his work. Her mother asked about his faith. Adrian did not pretend to be a saint. He said, "I am listening. I am learning." Then he asked if he could help wash the dishes. Grace watched her parents exchange a small, surprised smile. They took a premarital class without calling it that, 4 evenings with an older couple from the church who spoke about money, conflict, and forgiveness. "Secrets will rot a marriage," the husband said, tapping the table for emphasis. "Even small ones grow teeth." Grace glanced at Adrian. He felt the look like a hand on his spine. Later, as they walked to her door, she said quietly, "If there is anything I should know, tell me. I can bear hard news. I can't bear false peace." He wanted to open his entire life then, on that dark sidewalk. He wanted to dump the second phone in the storm drain and spill names, routes, debts, all of it. The words rose to his teeth and stopped. Fear pressed its thumb on his tongue. "I am trying," he said, aching with the thinness of it. "Then keep trying," she replied. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." He proposed on a simple morning in a public garden. No orchestra, no fireworks. Just a plain ring and a man on one knee who finally spoke a true sentence without guards, phones, or shadows. "Grace, I don't know how to be perfect, but I know I want to spend my life choosing the light with you." She covered her mouth, eyes wet. Yes. Their wedding was small and bright. White flowers in mason jars. A friend played the piano. The pastor spoke about love as a patient fire. Adrian's phone buzzed twice in his pocket during the vows. He let it buzz. When he kissed his bride, the church clapped, and he felt the room tilt toward something new. They did not fly to an island. They drove to a quiet bed and breakfast by the lake. They walked, they talked, they planned. In the evenings, they read side by side, shoulders touching. Adrian slept like a child for the first time in years. Back home, Grace moved into his large house and made small changes that felt like sunlight. Fresh bread on the counter, framed verses by the door, a pair of slippers waiting for him near the couch. She put a note on the refrigerator that read, "Home is where we tell the truth." For weeks, their life was soft. They cooked simple meals, prayed before bed, and laughed over burnt toast. Adrian learned how she liked her tea. She learned how he liked his shirts folded. They shared stories they had never told anyone. He began to delete numbers from his phones. He canceled 2 meetings that smelled of danger and ignored 3 warnings from men who did not like to be ignored. The shadows, however, were patient. Late one night, a black car idled too long at the corner. Another evening, a parcel arrived with no sender and a single, heavy key inside. Adrian locked both in a drawer and said nothing. Then, one rain-slick midnight, his second phone vibrated on the floor of his closet where he had hidden it under a pair of shoes. He almost let it ring. Almost. He picked it up and saw a name he wished he had erased. Kane. He stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. "What?" he whispered. "You're going soft," Kane said. "Word is you're cutting ties. That's a bad rumor for men like us." "I'm busy," Adrian replied. "You're married." Kane laughed, a hard, humorless sound. "We'll talk soon. Don't make me come find you." Adrian ended the call and stared at his reflection in the mirror, gold band on his finger, tired eyes, water beading on the glass. He placed the phone on the counter and pressed his palms to the sink. Behind the door, he could hear Grace turning a page, the soft rustle a sound he loved. He returned to bed and lay on his back, watching the ceiling. Grace turned toward him in the dark. "Bad dream?" she asked. "Just thoughts," he said. "Tell me one." "I like the sound of you turning pages," he said. It was true, and it was not enough. The next morning, as she packed a basket for the community kitchen, Grace paused. "Adrian, I found a charger behind the shoes in the closet. Do you have another phone?" He tied the basket with a ribbon to steady his hands. "Old work number," he said. "I'm shutting it down." She watched him for a long second, then nodded once. "Please do." He kissed her forehead, carried the basket to the car, and told the driver to take the long way. He powered the second phone off and slid it into the glove compartment. For the rest of the day, he chopped onions until his eyes burned and served soup until his back ached. He told himself he could live like this. He told himself the shadows would fade if he kept walking toward the light. But shadows grow longer when the light grows brighter. That night, Grace fell asleep with her hand resting on his chest. Adrian stared at the ceiling again, feeling the weight of two worlds pressing on the same heart. He could not hold both forever. One would have to die, and something or someone was already hunting his choice. The days after the wedding were like honey, sweet and golden. Grace filled Adrian's mansion with warmth that no chandelier or marble floor had ever brought before. She planted flowers by the windows, replaced his cold silver dishes with simple plates, and laughed when she burned toast, but insisted on serving it anyway. Adrian often found himself standing in the doorway just watching her, wondering how such a gentle woman had chosen him. But shadows don't vanish overnight. They creep in quietly, waiting for the right moment. One evening, as Grace cleared the dinner table, Adrian's hidden phone buzzed again. He had tucked it deep into his study drawer, but the sound echoed through the hall like thunder. Grace froze. "Adrian," she called, "your drawer is ringing." He hurried in and grabbed it before she could see the screen. His smile was stiff. "Old business contact. Nothing important." Grace frowned. "You said you shut that number down." "I will," he muttered, slipping it into his pocket. But the lie hung heavy in the air. That night, they argued. Grace's voice trembled as she said, "I didn't marry money, Adrian. I married a man I believed wanted to live in the light. If you keep secrets, our marriage will rot." Adrian felt cornered. He had faced armed men without flinching, but Grace's tears broke him in ways bullets never could. Yet still, fear kept him silent. He turned away instead of confessing. The following weeks were filled with tension. Grace tried to smile, but her heart carried a quiet weight. She prayed in their bedroom, sometimes late into the night, whispering Adrian's name into the heavens. She didn't know the full truth, but she knew he was fighting demons bigger than he admitted. Then came the night that tore the fragile peace apart. Adrian returned home past midnight, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Grace sat in the living room waiting, her Bible on her lap. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Meetings," he replied. "Meetings don't leave the smell of smoke and gunpowder on your jacket," she said, standing. He froze. "Adrian," she whispered, "are you still tied to them? To the men who live in shadows?" His silence was louder than words. Grace's face crumbled. "Do you want me to leave? Because if you don't cut this tie, I will. I can't build a family on blood money." Adrian reached for her hand, but she pulled away. His chest tightened. He had spent years commanding fear, yet in that moment, he felt powerless. "Grace," he finally said, his voice rough. "If I walk away from them, they'll come for me. Maybe even for you. It's not that easy." She stepped closer, her eyes brimming with tears. Better to face danger for doing right than to live safe while doing wrong. "Adrian, your soul is dying. And if your soul dies, our marriage dies with it." Her words cut through him like a blade. That night, long after Grace had gone to bed, Adrian sat in the dark with his head in his hands. He replayed her voice in his mind. He thought about the men he once called partners, the easy money, the fast deals. And then he thought of Grace, her laughter in the kitchen, her hands serving the poor, her prayers whispered in the night. For the first time, Adrian admitted to himself that he was standing at a crossroads. One path led to power, money, and death. The other led to loss, risk, but also to love and maybe redemption. When the morning sun rose, Adrian looked at Grace, still sleeping with her hand curled by her face. He made a silent promise. He didn't know how yet, but he would choose her, even if it cost him everything. The morning after Adrian's silent promise, the world did not suddenly change. The shadows still lurked, and the phone still vibrated with dangerous voices. But inside Adrian, something had shifted. He was tired of fear, tired of lies, tired of watching Grace's eyes fill with tears every night. He began small. The first step was shutting down the second phone. He didn't just turn it off this time. He snapped the SIM card in two and dropped it in the trash. When Grace found the broken pieces the next day, she looked at him with wide, questioning eyes. He said nothing, only nodded. For the first time in weeks, she hugged him without hesitation. But walking away from the underworld was like trying to leave a burning house. The smoke followed him. Men he had once partnered with came knocking, sometimes literally. Cain, the most dangerous of them, sent two men to Adrian's office one evening. "You're not out," one of them growled, slamming a hand on the desk. "You're too valuable." Cain doesn't take betrayal kindly. Adrian leaned forward, his jaw tight. "Tell Cain this. I'd rather lose everything than lose her. If he comes after Grace, I'll bring down every door he hides behind." The men left with threats on their lips, but for the first time, Adrian didn't feel fear. He felt something stronger, resolve. Grace watched him wrestle, stumble, and push forward. Some days he came home defeated, contracts canceled, money lost, his empire shrinking. Other days he returned with small victories, new clean deals, new partners who wanted nothing to do with crime. She stood beside him, her prayers covering him like armor. When he fell into despair, she reminded him, better to build slowly with clean hands than quickly with bloodied ones. Months turned into years. The illegal world slowly cut him off, and Adrian let it. It was painful, but with Grace's love and patience, he built a new kind of empire. He started investing in technology, clean energy, and housing projects for struggling families. The world began to see him not as a feared billionaire, but as a leader who gave second chances. Grace's smile returned, and their marriage began to heal. They laughed again, they prayed together, and for the first time, Adrian felt he was truly alive. Then one evening, as they prepared dinner, the television broke the news that froze them both. Breaking story: crime syndicate collapses, several leaders arrested, others killed in a failed deal. The names and faces flashed across the screen. Men Adrian had once eaten with, traveled with, laughed with. Cain was among the dead. Others were led away in handcuffs, their empires falling like dominoes. Adrian dropped the knife he was holding, his breath caught in his throat. Grace turned to him, her hand gripping his arm. "That could have been you," she whispered. His eyes filled with tears. "It should have been me." "No," Grace said softly, holding his face. "It wasn't, because you chose a different path. You chose life." Adrian pulled her into his arms, his chest shaking as he buried his face in her shoulder. "If not for you, Grace, I would be in that grave or behind those bars. You saved me." She smiled through her tears. "Not me, Adrian. It was God's love, working through us." They stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of bread in the oven and the sound of the news still playing. For the first time in years, Adrian felt free, not just from crime, but from the weight of guilt and fear. From that day on, he poured himself into good works, building schools, helping communities, giving jobs to those society had forgotten. His love for Grace blossomed deeper than he thought possible, and every time he saw her smile, he remembered the truth. The billionaire every man once feared had been transformed, not by money, not by power, but by the love of a good woman and the grace of God. And this time, his empire was built on light, not shadows. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you find the story worth watching. If you do, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories, like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thanks for watching.